church, the Saint Esteban, in the town of Berga, which is behind us, which is just in Navarre, not far from the coast. And this is the first stage of our search of the river Bidasoa, which is just below us, which we'll visit later. It all has to do with a story of Vikings going to Pamplona, either in 859 or 858, which there's a lot of controversy over whether it happened or whether it didn't, and some people suggest that if it did happen, it happened via this river below us. So we're just about to continue our search for the river and film the river a little bit to see whether we think that it would have been possible for Vikings to go up that river towards Pamplona, certainly not to Pamplona. So we just saw some nice horses here in the town of Berga, and we'll continue. We're sitting here still in the town of Berga, which is in modern Navarre, or Navarra in Spanish, whose capital is Pamplona. And the story that we're looking at was reported by various Arabic Muslim historians. The most important one was Ibn Hayyan. And now, if this story is true, and however the Vikings got to Pamplona, or actually as it's written in the text, more means the limits or the confines of Pamplona, which basically means in Navarre somewhere, so it didn't mean that the Vikings actually got all the way to Pamplona. And that is what we're examining. In this story, it says in various places, many of whom copied from each other, that Garcia, who was the lord of Pamplona and the son of Inigo Arista, who is often claimed to be the first king, if you like, of Pamplona and of Navarre, and he was captured supposedly by these Vikings and ransomed, and for a large amount of money, and he also had to give some of his sons into captivity, as hostages, for his payment of this money. So this is the story we're looking at. There's a lot of problems with this as we're trying to examine about if this actually happened, and there are many doubts about whether it did or not. It all comes down to interpretation of certain Arabic words, how they would have got here. And one suggestion was, as I said before, that they didn't row hundreds of kilometers all the way up the Ebro and then walk across land, across the hills to Pamplona, but if they did come to Pamplona, or at least to Navarre, they came somewhere from the Atlantic coast, possibly, it has been suggested, via this river. This river, Bidasoa, is as it is today. It might have been different more than 1,000 years ago, but even if you look at this particular part, the way it is now, which is in June, you could certainly, I would imagine, Viking ships could row up this far. There are little rapids, but they're not too severe. And if we look in this direction, we can see it's quite deep. Over on the right is the lagoon, which is in France, so one can locate oneself. So certainly, as far as I'm concerned, this far anyway, Viking ships could have come up this far. How far much further they could have come is difficult to say without going much further up the river. Biscay a little bit further from where we were before. It's quite calm here. There are parts of the river here that are barely passable. That is partly because there are a lot of hydroelectric stations along the river now which change the flow of the river. But certainly Viking ships at this time in the 9th century could take about 40 to 60 warriors, Viking people, and they rowed generally up the rivers, and they could certainly row up this part of the river here. In later times the ships got a little bigger. They could also drag their ships a certain distance over land or over obstacles if they wanted to. So it's not impossible that this far you could come in the 9th century. This is Elizondo. We'll go and have a look at the river in a minute. The river Biscay turns in at this stage into the river Bastan, which has its origins up on the French border a little bit further north. As far as I can see, there is no way that people could get anywhere near this in Viking ships in the 9th century. So it makes it increasingly difficult to realize that they might have done this, Vikings might have come there, unless of course they were just coming into Navarre and not actually going all the way to Pamplona. Bastan River here in Elizondo, which leads into and changes its name to the Biscay, is very, very shallow here. At other places downriver a little bit, it's extremely unlikely that Viking ships could come this far. But the question really is, why would they want to? And they certainly would be a hard job to get from here to Pamplona. You couldn't do it by ship, you would have to then walk a long way. And I think the question is twofold. One is, do the texts that we read where they say that it comes to the height of Pamplona, which most people nowadays will say doesn't mean Pamplona itself, but it means the limits, the confines of Pamplona, which is basically Navarre, which of course we're still in Navarre here. And why would they want to do it anyway? What was the political situation between Asturias, Pamplona, Cordoba, and indeed in Aquitaine and in Gascony? And these are some of the interesting questions. I'm increasingly of the opinion that if this raid happened, it didn't happen at Pamplona itself. It might have happened somewhere around here or a bit further north towards what is now France. But these are the questions that I'm looking into. Whether I'll be able to answer them all or not is doubtful.